Hey, what's going on, man?
How are you?
I'm good. Thank you for doing this for me. It's been a while.
Absolutely.
How's everything been going?
Good.
Anyway, so the first thing that I wanted to ask you is, your background and early influences, how you got into music in general, and what really inspired you to start playing drums, and tell me about that journey and how you got into it, and eventually led to uh, working with national acts like Warrant.
What inspired me to get into music really was my upbringing in my household. My father was an artist. My father was a clothing designer, and he made beautiful custom tailored suits for, rich business people in New York and Philadelphia. And my father was a huge fan of big band music. So he was always playing Benny Goodman and Count Basie and Harry James and Buddy Rich and, Louis Bellson and all these really amazing, artists, on the stereo in the house at full volume. He absolutely loved music. And just seeing how much he loved it and just being exposed to the rhythms, I just started naturally banging literally on everything. I would bang on tables. I would bang on, my father's car hood, because the different panels of the cars had different sounds and stuff like that. And I would bang on my head and open my mouth and close my mouth to get different sounds. And they just saw that and purchased a pair of bongos for me. I was probably about the age of 4. And then I started taking lessons with a local guy at around 6. And really that's where the whole journey began.
What were your earliest influences that really inspired you to continue and pursue that? Obviously, you were inspired by the drums or the percussion itself, but eventually you got into different, genres and different bands.
Picking up at age 6 when I was taking lessons, the two biggest people that inspired me were Buddy Rich and Gene Krupa. And particularly because, Buddy Rich, when my father would play records where he was soloing was just obviously insane. Buddy Rich was just a master. And then Gene Krupa was, just an incredible rhythmic kind of player. One of the famous songs that he's featured on is Sing, Sing, Sing. And, who cannot help but get inspired by that? So those were really my two earliest influences. But as I started to get a little bit older, my older brother was really into, what they used to call back then jazz rock or acid rock. So he was listening to people like, Cream and Jimi Hendrix, particularly, and then, also more obscure fusion stuff like the Mahavishnu Orchestra. So now I was getting into people like Ginger Baker and Mitch Mitchell, and I was getting into people like, Billy Cobham and Narada Michael Walden and those types of people. So that's what kind of got me a little bit from the big band era into more of the rock and jazz rock and acid rock. And eventually that led to, of course, prog rock. So I was huge into like Genesis and King Crimson. Well, of course, Led Zeppelin. Just got into, Rush, all of those types of bands. So that's kind of the progression. And now you kind of have me at probably about the age of 16, 17, so.
So who was your biggest influence out of those bands? I would think Neil Peart back then.
I think overall, John Bonham and Led Zeppelin was probably a really, really big influence of mine. But I was really heavily into Ginger Baker, Mitch Mitchell, Billy Cobham. God, if I were to say one, it would probably be John Bonham, which obviously isn't as classic rock or avant-garde as some of the other groups, but I think overall it would be him. But certainly, yeah, Rush and Neil Peart and all those other players were a big part too as well.
Yeah, what do you like best about John Bonham's playing? What really, what his style or technique or whatever I could think of.
Yeah, I mean, I think ultimately, I really loved, I mean, his feel is just insane. I mean, there's very few people that can even cop his feel, including me. Um, but I think it was overall what he was doing with his bass drum, and some of the things that he was doing between his hands and his bass drum, the fills, the riffs, where he played accents and things like that. I mean, very, very quite interesting. And of course, his sound was also very, very amazing.
Yeah.
Not to mention that he was supporting a really amazing band. I mean, so like, I mean, if the group wasn't writing things like Black Dog, I mean, how could you be John Bonham? So it's just that perfect combination of players that come together where everybody supports the other and everybody fills a space. I mean, imagine if John Bonham like had to get a real gig to pay rent, and he had to join some cover band or something and do nothing but that his entire life and play weddings. He would have never had an opportunity to be John Bonham. So, it's a combination of all those things.
Did you focus on your own creative voice when you were playing, or I mean, what
Yes.
out of his style, for example, John Bonham's or anybody else's, like for example, with me with like guitar, I have different techniques that I am inspired by like Ingve and Randy Rhoads, and I can name exactly what it is that inspired me. But what do you really think that you took from that, other than maybe just the inspiration itself, or maybe some particular techniques that you really liked, or something that you carried into your professional career?
If you're asking particularly what I took away from John Bonham's playing was, again, ultimately the use of his kick drum and the technique that he had with his bass drum. Of course, the most famous thing being, the triplet, but also the quads and how he inserted those into beats and grooves. Some of his odd time playing, but within a rock context, also were things that I took away ultimately from John Bonham. Some of his playing, a very famous solo of John Bonham was Moby Dick, where he plays with his hands. So, when I performed my drum solos, I played with my hands too as well. So, the interesting thing about being inspired by different musicians is that you might listen and sort of really love something that a player does, but you're never going to be able to emulate it 100% of, from the originator, so you take a little bit of salt from this person, a little pepper from this person, a little cayenne from this person, and then you intermix all that with your own personality and your own interests and your own upbringing and the different styles of music that you're surrounded by, and then it becomes you essentially. So from Bonham, those things I mentioned, from, let's just say, for example, Neil Peart, it might be, his use of, the octagon drum set and those crazy fills he used to do around where you go, and stuff like that. And even if it's the smallest thing you take away from that player, it adds to who you are. I listened to Stuart Copeland and the way he accented certain notes and beats, took away a little bit from him. I listened to Billy Cobham with his double bass drum techniques, so you pick and take a little bit from everybody, so to speak.
And more or less make it your own, and then come up with you have your own voice. You create your own voice after doing that, which is which is crucial. I think you don't want to emulate somebody and sound exactly like them anyway. And I think that's it's very important that you are open-minded and you take from different influences like that. It doesn't necessarily have to be technique, like you were saying. It could just been the drum set itself, or So eventually, you got into going to Berklee, which it's awesome. Before Berklee, for example, what was your musical experiences like? cover bands, or you said you took drum lessons. Did you learn to read music? Or you taught different types, signatures, music theory, stuff like that?
The progression pretty much as it goes was get the bongos at age 4, start taking lessons from the local guy at age 6. And then I was introduced to a guy named Tony DiNicola, who played with the Harry James Big Band. And he was a very traditional player. So immediately he started teaching me, obviously, the proper technique, proper way to hold sticks, the proper way to sit, proper way to play the bass drum, how to read music, and not only how to read music, but also, how to perfect the snare drum. And then we also talked about things like, playing jazz, of course, and playing Latin. So I learned all of the sort of traditional things that you would from a really, really good teacher. That progressed into me meeting up with a guy named Kenwood Denard in New York City, who, played with people like Dizzy Gillespie and, Jaco Pastorius and people of that nature. And now Kenwood started getting me into more progressive things, jazz fusion, playing in odd times, polyrhythms and things of that nature. Kenwood was the person that inspired me to go to Berklee College of Music. Kenwood was a graduate of Berklee. And what he did is he said, man, we got to get you into Berklee College of Music. And 2 years prior, he started training me for the auditions. Back when I was entering Berklee College of Music, the audition process was very complicated. I mean, it wasn't like anyone got in. It was very, very difficult to get in. So I was highly recommended by Kenwood. I had prepared 2 years prior. We literally, basically, for 2 years worked on the audition, and so again, that was everything from soloing to playing jazz, to playing with brushes, to playing Latin grooves, to reading snare drum music, to sight reading, all of that good stuff. So when I went in to do the audition, and I was highly recommended by Kenwood Denard, I got in, and Berklee had a rating system. They would rate you, I think it was on a scale from 1 to 10, I think, or 1 to 9. I forget what it was. And I came in at a 7, which was good. And then I progressed, I think, to like the highest score by the time I graduated.
What was your experience like at Berklee, and what's your biggest takeaway from that?
When I was at Berklee, my biggest sort of experience there was studying with a guy named Gary Shafee. Gary Shafee actually didn't teach at Berklee. I had to drive to his house and take lessons, and he charged like some insane amount of money. But he was the guy, I mean, like literally when I would go to my lessons, Joey Kramer from Aerosmith would just be finishing and coming out the door, So, I mean, it was just like, that's the kind of clientele that he had. He taught Steve Smith from Journey. He taught a bunch of other people as well. But with Gary, I mean, I learned all kinds of stuff. He opened me up to what's called the linear style of playing. And I learned about, odd phrasings and stick control and all kinds of very, very interesting things. So he was a really, really big influence on my playing. There was a lot of other people at Berklee that were really good for me as well. There was a guy named, John Ramsey, which was just a really good player in terms of being like sort of a working drummer, so to speak, going in to a gig, approaching the gig professionally, playing you called it bread and butter, playing the simplest thing, keeping things real, so I learned quite a lot from him, which was very, very useful. When I graduated from Berklee, I was a working drummer in Boston, playing weddings and playing all kinds of stuff and making a lot of money and just doing simple sessions and things like that. So he was really big instrumental on that. Going back to Gary Shafee, he was really useful in developing my own personal style. And John Ramsey was really useful in like making sure that I got out of school and I wasn't going to have to work at Starbucks. I was going to be a professional drummer. Even if it was playing weddings and bar mitzvahs and stuff like that, it didn't matter. As long as I was playing drums, I was happy. So he was a very practical teacher. And then of course, just being around a lot of other musicians and a lot of other styles. I mean, every night I would play with, one guy from Italy, one guy from Japan, one guy, we'd play with people that had classical backgrounds, jazz backgrounds. It was just this amalgamation of people that come together. And that was just really good to be around that kind of energy. And of course, I developed a philosophy called, the click of the future. And what that basically means is that your peers that are around you are the people that are going to support you later on in your life. These are the people that you're forming great relationships with. So I formed relationships with everyone at Berklee. I networked, I jammed, I smiled and said hi to everybody. And it just turns out that 2 graduates from Berklee were the people that actually were the ones that helped me get my first gig in New York City with a major label, because they were like, man, we got to get Bobby, So those are some of the things that really big takeaways from Berklee, is that you're just surrounded by everyone like you that wants to do what you do. And they're from all around the world. And that influence is just really amazing. And then, of course, the players and the teachers there were very helpful as well.
Yourself with people that have the same or similar goals as yourself. And,
of course. Yeah. You surround yourself with like-minded people.
That's awesome.
And then to answer your question about like why I chose Berklee over a school like, let's just say, for example, MI or University of Miami. What else was there available at the time? I think, to be quite honest with you, Musicians Institute wasn't even on my map. Musicians Institute is a different type of school. Berklee is a school where it's a college, so you also have to do academics as well. So when I was at Berklee, I was doing art history classes. I was doing writing classes, and admittedly, at the time, I wasn't sure, what it was all about. But those classes and that experience was ultimate in my entire life. Later on, I came to realize the importance of all those other classes and all that other influence in my life. But I think the person that chooses to go to MI is in many cases, for many, many years, MI allowed you to do nothing but your instrument. So you literally can go and do nothing but guitar. And like, what 18-year-old kid wouldn't want to do that? You know what I mean? So definitely Berklee, and MI have their different purposes. You know what I mean? So now recently, I believe MI has just tried to become more like Berklee, and have classes and BAs and stuff like that. But at the time, the obvious choice for me was Berklee. It was highly recommended by my teacher. It was near New York City. It was not too far away from where I lived in Princeton, New Jersey. So it made a lot of sense to me. So that's how Berklee came about.
So you attended Berklee, obviously you graduated from Berklee, and then you said you got your first gig where you were referred to or recommended, and that helped you to get into a band with a record deal. Was that Beggars and Thieves that you're talking about, the band?
It was my first professional high-level gig. Was basically, it came about because 2 of my friends, Dave Santoro and was it Nunzio and Dave? 2 guys from bass player and guitar player from Berklee, who I jam with all the time. Went to New York, and I used to communicate with those guys. I just knew that those guys were going to do something one day, and they were great guys, and we were friends. So I would literally get on a train from Boston and go all the way down to New York City, and then get on a subway all the way down to the East Village just to sit in on maybe a 1 or 2 blues tunes or something, and that would be like a 10, 12, 15-hour round trip, and then I'd come back to Berklee and go back to my classes. But I was top of mind. I was in top of their mind.
You made it that way intentionally. That's where the benefit of networking comes in, I think.
Stayed on top of their mind. That's right.
Awesome.
And when I was they gave me a call and they just said, hey, we're in, the Electric Ladyland Studios in the Village, recording with John Luongo for Chrysalis Records. And we need you. So I jumped in my van. I went down there and played the session. And while I was there, I stayed going back to Kenwood Denard, my teacher. And while I was staying with Kenwood Denard, his roommate actually, was walking the dog for someone that was signed to Atlantic Records and was looking for a drummer, and that was Beggars and Thieves. So I interviewed with them, and I came to join that group, which had a lot going for it. I mean, they were writing with Desmond Childs. They were signed to Atlantic Records. They had Q Prime Management, who handles Metallica. Their producers were Steve Thompson and Michael Barbiero, that handled, Guns N' Roses and Ozzy Osbourne and a whole bunch of other people. Their lawyer was Ina Maybeck. There was really a lot from a business perspective going for the band, and it seemed like a really, really good opportunity. So it turned out that I ended up, continuing with that group, recording a record, doing a little bit of live performing and touring with them, and then moving on to other things.
Yeah. So, was it that the band just eventually ran its course and then you moved on to something else, or is it as a result of maybe the time period or the era or the style of music that they were doing?
Yeah, great questions. I mean, basically, and this opens up a conversation to a lot of other points. There was no course that it ran. In other words, it was one of those things where all the ducks are lined up and it just doesn't happen. And then this introduced me to the business of music. I realized, in a maybe a bad way, that it's the music business. It's not the, it's the business of music, and it's not the music. I grew up on music and music. I loved music. It changed my life. It brought me meaning. It brought me purpose. I was excited about it. But as soon as I got out of Berklee and I realized now I have to make a living with it, it sort of changed things a little bit. I mean, trust me, I would love to sit in a room playing in 13/8, listening to Mahavishnu for the rest of my life. But what happened was I was like, holy shit, I can't pay rent playing in 13/8, listening to John McLaughlin. So I started to look at well, how can I merge my love for music with the business of music? And I saw this group, Beggars and Thieves, that basically had this big deal and lots of big management behind it. And they had some cool influences, and they were doing some cool stuff. And I thought, maybe I could merge my passion and love for music with the business and kind of find a happy medium. So, I joined this group, and, you make a record and you get slated for release, and then it gets postponed, and then it gets postponed again, and then it gets released, and then the label doesn't do anything to promote it. And, literally I was running around stores all over the tri-state area, calling Atlantic saying, this store number 58 doesn't have it. Store number 282 in Pensacola doesn't have it. It was ridiculous. It was like I was becoming the A&R guy and the promoter guy and the fan club guy, trying to galvanize the record company to do something. And in fact, I was at the record company sitting in a circle with the interns, stuffing envelopes, to send out to fans. And Jason Flom, which today is a huge A&R guy who was just starting out back then, comes into the room and goes, "What are you doing here? You're the artist." And I was thinking to myself, yeah, what am I doing here? I am the artist. In other words, why the hell aren't you guys doing your job? And that was a really pivotal point for me, which actually got me into doing what I'm doing more so now, the business of music, or trying to bridge the gap between the two. But essentially, so yes, it did run its course, so to speak. I say there was no course, but that caused me to form another group called Left for Dead, appropriately named Left for Dead, right? And this featured guys that were all part of signed recording acts, and were looking to just kind of rage against the machine, to be honest with you. So, a lot of our sentiment and our what we were singing about was essentially raging against the machine. So, and that was more of that brought me back more to my roots of my playing, very aggressive drumming, very progressive drumming, It was kind of a cross between Pantera and Soundgarden, or Pantera and Alice in Chains. No, I was going to say, and ultimately that really was my true style of playing. You know what I mean?
I'm really looking forward to checking that out.
Yeah.
I'm not familiar. Did you guys put out an album or anything that where, you know, somebody that is interested could look it up or find it?
Yeah. I mean,
for example,
it was, you know, it was released by, it was licensed too, because what we did is we got a chance, obviously, to make a record. It was recorded in Orlando, Florida, of all places, from an investor that basically made a deal with us. He was like, you can go in and make your record, and if you guys get a deal in 6 months, here's the terms of the deal. And if you don't, you own the masters. So, you know, at one point, you know, I just basically talked to the rest of the guys and I said, hey, you know, I don't want this thing to just be dead in a drawer. So I'm going to do a P&D deal, pressing and distribution deal, with a company in Japan called Alpha Music, and it was released in Japan. If you Google it, you know, essentially, if you Google it on YouTube, Left 4 Dead, you know, I haven't officially released it, but there's fans that have released it on their YouTube channels and stuff, so you could check it out. The songs, I mean, it's the band was tight as shit. The playing is great. You know, and we'll leave it at that.
Definitely looking forward to checking that out. I'll look that up. You got into Warrant, which is a huge act back then. And can you tell me a little bit about that experience?
And back then, I was doing music 24 hours a day, practicing like a beast, training with all of the best people in the world. So I got to a point where when I walked up on stage, I knew I was going to be a badass for what I did. You know, in other words, and what I did was I was a very strong player. I played very hard. I played with a lot of emotion, and I made a statement when I played. And I think that most people that saw me back then would go, "Damn, dude, that guy has some fucking energy, and that guy has some chops, and that guy has a lot of like passion." You know, and that's pretty much what I had going for me. You know, most of the things where I was successful, the most successful, was doing me. You know, when I tried to sort of be maybe what Beggars and Thieves wanted me to be, you know, I wasn't quite as good as it. But when I was doing me, and I was Bobby Borg, right? And I was like, and I was in a group that was kind of, you know, I was part of the co-founder. That's where I was the most successful. Strangely enough, Warrant had us as an opening act for them. So you might say, wow, this group that sounded like Alice in Chains and Pantera kind of, you know, mixed together, you know, how is it that you opened for Warrant? Because I think back then at that time, you know, music was changing, and Warrant, they're not stupid people, right? I mean, they're smart, and I think they realized that they've got to change a little bit with the times too. So to brand themselves with this act that did that kind of music that was popular at that time would also make them kind of cool. You know what I mean? So, and then of course we're thinking, hey, it's going to be great to play in front of their audience and get, you know, and get exposed. So it was this mutually beneficial type of relationship. In any case, I got a chance to be seen by the group. And at the time, James Kotak was playing drums. James Kotak went on to play with the Scorpions. I replaced James. And they used to watch me play. And when James, there was some issues with James, and James, you know, was no longer in the band, they immediately called me without a question. And the cool thing about playing in Warrant is Janie was Bobby. I mean, it was really, to be quite honest with you, I just played like me, and there was never any objections from anyone in the group about, hey, don't do that, or don't play that way, or, you know, or tone it down or whatever. I just did me. And I got to be honest with you, it was a really, really fun experience. And it was great playing. I think that group really knows how to put on a show. Janie was an amazing front person, and everyone in the group was just about having a good time and getting up on stage and playing. And it was very non-restrictive, and it was a lot of fun. I recorded 2 albums with them, Belly to Belly. I wrote and recorded 2 albums with them, Belly to Belly, and then we also did a record called Warrant Live that features like a 2 or 3 minute solo. So that's how sort of the whole Warrant thing came about.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome. I think that Warren, as individuals, were very talented musicians, and at the time that you're speaking of, that's when the grunge era was really taking over, and I listened to the Belly to Belly, which definitely has that grunge kind of influence, but the music itself, I think, is it's great and everything, but I think when you start changing who you really are, as a band, that it doesn't come out sounding as natural.
Yeah, I mean, the record did not do well in terms of the other records that Warrant had released, and there's something to be said about changing your style and maybe it not sounding legit because it sounds forced or it sounds faked. And going along with that, I got to be honest with you, man. I was at the NAMM show in Los Angeles, and I heard this record, and I was like, "Damn, that is good! Like, what is that? That is really kind of heavy. That's pretty good." And then someone says it's Warrant, and I'm like, "What?" It's like, what? Like that same group that did Cherry Pie? I go, how is that possible? And I remember even personally thinking it wasn't believable. Like I just felt like they were just kind of just trying to mimic what was going on with the times. But the truth is that they mimicked it pretty well. But
musicians.
Yeah, but it just didn't feel believable or real. And I'm so I'm I'm not offended by any way if you said that about the Belly to Belly record too, because I mean it was real to me because that's the kind of music I was playing. But
you were allowed to be yourself, but that was you, and they were trying to mold themselves into something that they're not.
Yeah. Maybe, but this actually brings up a whole nother conversation, John, which could really be a podcast in itself. But I mean, I'll just tackle it really, really quickly. It is the music business, and there is this whole idea of being an artist and like being true to yourself and all that kind of stuff. But then, man, how do I say this?
You gotta make money.
How do I say this without like, getting into like I mean basically if you're doing what you love to do and you're working at the post office all day long and then you come home and your wife is like yelling at you that we don't have enough money to like buy diapers for the baby and stuff. I mean, at some point, when do you go, yeah, I'm just going to do my art and I'm happy like sitting in my little living room in some random city in some random place? And at some point, when do you go, well, look, if I want to do music and I want to pay the bills with music, then let me try to like see if I could play the game a little bit. Let me try to see if I could take my self-respect and integrity and somehow weave it in to the demands of the industry and make it work where I could find a happy medium. Yeah. Now, some people are able to do that really, really well, and then some people aren't, and they sound like sellouts. But ultimately, I think as long as you are still maintaining your artist integrity and you still are doing what you love and what you believe in, but you're also being wise to the marketplace, I think finding that happy medium is, can serve you. And listen, I love music, but I don't love playing in my cellar with nobody ever hearing me and everyone in my family and my friends giving me shit because I don't have my act together and can't pay my bills. That to me is not fun in any way, shape, or form. So
I totally agree with you. If you don't mind me elaborating a little bit, because I think that you can agree with me that we grew up in an era where integrity was very important, and there was always talk of sellouts, people selling out and this and that. And, and the point that you're making is very important, because you do have to, you have to make a living and you have to adapt. And sometimes you might have to try to find that balance between pleasing yourself and also being able to be marketable at the same time. So you got to find that happy medium. And in some cases, not everybody adapts too well to that.
Right. Some people do it better than others. Yeah.
Where they sound like they're fake, which, and again, not to be taken, as a, negative, but like you said, you're not offended by, the opinion on that album, because it's not necessarily you that had to change anything. It was them, as a band, that were trying to change who they were, and it sounds that way to me, at least, and you were being true to yourself because you said that's what you were already doing. So that's probably why they thought you were a good fit,
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, John, it works for some and it doesn't work for others. I mean, if I probably, a lot of your
Yeah.
listeners would be shocked if I showed you pictures of Pantera before they became Pantera.
Absolutely.
They were a flat out glam band wearing spandex, and then, and I mean, they would probably be horrified, but they dropped all that stuff and they focused on the heavier stuff, and people think they're gods, or thought they were gods. So it worked for them. I mean, sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. I mean, look at Taylor Swift. She went from, country to pop, I mean, so, so, listen, I mean, I think that art is a very personal thing. And when I was back at Berklee College of Music, I was horrified when I was graduating, absolutely horrified, because I was like, on one hand, I was like, I don't want to end up working at like Home Depot on a forklift at 12 o'clock at night. But at the same time, I'm horrified that I'm just going to end up playing goofy pop music and just to survive. So I was like, what am I going to do here how do I find that happy medium between the two? Now, some people get lucky and do their 13/8 madness jazz fusion shit and blow up and become successful, fusion players. But of course, there's not a whole lot of them that get that lucky, right? So I mean, that's what I would have loved to do, when I graduate. I would have loved to been in a Mahavishnu Orchestra or a Pat Metheny type group and just have done that. But I knew, man, I better get my shit together here, or I'm gonna be working at Home Depot, So I tried to figure out a way of how can I maintain my love for music while at the same time survive,
What you've done well, obviously, because, from the point you're talking about graduating from Berklee, going to Beggars and Thieves, and then you got into Warrant and a couple other things, and then which we're transitioning now, I assume, into your the whole music business side of it, which you're like a music encyclopedia, and I just want to state that you have been very, very helpful to me, and I sincerely appreciate it. You've been a big inspiration to me, and I sincerely appreciate all the guidance and the help and the mentorship that you've offered me. And I'm honored that I've had that privilege to learn from you, and and you are doing very well at it. And still, I mean, you taught at Musicians Institute, which you recently resigned from, but you've also a professor at USC. Is that correct?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
So
You also were at UCLA, weren't you? At one point. Now you're just doing one particular.
yeah. So basically, I was at the Herb Alpert School of Music for UCLA. I was at UCLA Extension. I was at Musicians Institute, and I was at USC Thornton School of Music all at the same time. How I juggled and balanced that stuff, when I slept, I don't know. But now I resigned from all of that, and I'm a full-time assistant professor of practice at the Music Industry Studies department at Thornton School of Music at USC. And very proud to be there. And I got to be honest with you, everything that we've talked about prior is pretty much the reason for that success, to be honest with you. I mean, all of these things that we're talking about, the art versus commerce and the decisions of survival and the struggles and the, misconceptions of what this music industry is all about are all what obviously was ingrained into what I'm doing now. So it's almost like maybe my grand scheme for me was maybe never to be a professional drummer for the rest of my life. Maybe that was just part of the journey to take me where I am today. Who knows, right? If you look at it from more of a spiritual perspective, who knows? But essentially, all of these books that you see in the back, Music Marketing with the Musician, Personal Finance for Musicians, Music Publishing, Business Basics, all these books that I have on my wall on the back are all successful, to be quite honest with you, because I listen to what the audience wants, and then I give it to them in a way that is artistically expressive to me. So I've found the perfect balance between art and commerce. I'm not just writing books that make me happy. What the hell is that going to do? Right?
Your books are amazing, Bobby. And what's awesome about it, I'm sorry to cut you off, but I absolutely love your books. As I to learn using your books at the Musicians Institute, but the way that you present the material is wonderful, and the way that you have the questions at the end of each chapter to basically help people to comprehend what they're learning. Your whole approach on it as a musician, because you have that experience as a musician as well, not just an author. I think that the way that you present the material is very comprehensible, and it's easy to learn because you're good at presenting the material. You're a good teacher as well.
Oh, thanks, John. A guy by the name of Gail Hickman basically was a TV writer here in Los Angeles, and he read one of the earlier manuscripts, and he just said, "Why are you trying to sound like a writer?"
Yeah.
He goes, "Why don't you just sound like you?" And I go, "What is me?" And he goes, "Sit down right here real quick. I want you to tell me about management. Let's just say, for example, just start talking." And then he goes, "Nope, you're trying to sound like an author. Just talk, be you." And then I just be me. He goes, "Write that way." And I said, "Are you serious?" And he goes, "Yes. Hey, I'm going to tell you guys a story about management. Okay. You guys listening up? All right, let's do this." All that kind of stuff is exactly the way I write. It's all credited to him. He gave me confidence to just be me before I was trying to sound like someone else. So that's a lesson right there in itself. You have to have the confidence and willingness to be hated and be criticized to really kind of allow your inner voice to come out and to become who you are. And fortunately, I was able to find that voice with my books. And, now I'm sort of on my 10th or 11th book, it's 20 years or 22 years later, and of course, once I did the books, then all the schools wanted me to teach. And here I am. And I got to be honest with you, I'm absolutely, I love what I do. It affords me a very good living, and I help a lot of different people. And of course, as a teacher, you're going to piss off some people too as well, because sometimes as a teacher, you have to kind of, have tough love. I actually call myself a coach, really, to be honest with you, because it's kind of like your football coach. If you show up without your cleats or you show up without your helmet and you show up late, a good coach is going to give you shit for that, right? And they're going to say, what the hell are you doing, man? Where's your helmet? Like, run around the track 20 times, give me 50 push-ups, you know, I mean, and the person's going to swear you out and cuss you out and all that kind of stuff. But 20 years later, they're probably going to say, that guy kicked my ass and that guy helped me, you know. But
I can vouch for you from personal experience with you because you have called me out a couple times. And I love that. I have more respect for you that way because that's how I am. I'd rather you be straight up, you know, direct with me and blunt and call me out on my shit. You know, if I'm crossing the line in some way or whatever. And you've done that a couple times while I was at Musicians Institute. And that's one of the things that I loved about you as a teacher. And one of the things that really you gained my respect for you and made me actually really, really want to pay attention to you and listen to what you had to say. You are an advocate of the DIY thing for music, and you know every in and out of that. And what are some of the qualities or whatever that you would suggest that would be needed to manage an artist that basically needs somebody to book their gigs, and handle all their, the business side of it.
All right. So now that we've kind of gone from my experiences as a musician into the authorship and educational aspect, let's take this a little bit further and talk more about the business of music. And one of the biggest things a lot of people oftentimes ask is, I need help. How do I get that help? Well, the first way you get help is by helping yourself. And I just want to stress this for 2 seconds because, there's this whole independent artist movement that is more possible today than ever before, simply because of the tools that are available. You can get distribution and you can get on Spotify and you can be in India, in 2 weeks from now. Whereas when I was doing it, that was impossible. You had to have a big record deal and you had to have records made and shipped and all that kind of stuff. The only problem now is that everyone and their grandmom is doing it, which basically means that now there's 100,000 songs like released, per day or whatever. And it's just like, how the hell are you going to, find yourself, so it becomes difficult. So a big question for a lot of people is like, oh, well, then I must need a manager because the manager is going to do all these wonderful things for me. Well, I can just sit back and be the artist. So just to make it clear, when you do get a manager, you're not sitting back at all. You are basically helping just as much, if not more than ever, right? And that manager is probably going to be attracted to you because you are doing it yourself. If you're just going to sit back and look for a handout, typically any manager that is of any kind of skill set is not going to really want to be a part of that because who the hell wants to manage a lazy person? It's not going to work. So until you're managing yourself, don't even think about a manager. Okay. Then second, once you do, a manager does come into kind of perspective. It's probably they're going to ask you, not you ask them. They're going to notice you and they're going to go, wow, I really like what you guys are doing. I think I could take you to the next level. Now, what are the qualities that you should look for in a manager? Does the manager have to be have star clients and have authored books and be working at huge universities and have 30 years experience or all of this knowledge? Not necessarily. Some of the best young managers are people that don't really know a whole lot about the industry, but just love your band, love you, have a passion for music, have a really good personality, know how to network, know how to shake hands, know how to ask the right questions, are enthusiastic or uplifting. Look at the glass is always full, not half empty, and it's just, that's what you're looking for. Because the problem is if you get someone that's too big for you, they're going to be busy with their bigger clients, making money. So you want that guy next door or your best buddy or the person that just graduated from, grad school or whatever, and from business or whatever. You want that person involved in working with you because those are the ones that are going to stick with you through thick and thin, Now, be clear that managers don't book gigs. Technically speaking, managers will help you get an agent that will book gigs. Now, with that being said, there's lots of managers that book gigs. They just don't realize that legally they're really not supposed to. But nonetheless, managers will help you organize your day. They'll just like say, hey, come on, you guys, we got to get more regimented schedule of rehearsals. Hey, there's this great rehearsal street down the street, rehearsal spot down the street where you can save $10. Or, hey, come on, you guys, don't fight. Keep it together, you guys. I believe in you. You're part coach, you're part like therapist, you're like all kinds of stuff, So there's a lot of good that a manager can bring to you. It's just like a fifth person really in the band that cares. And that's what you should look for. And that's really what it takes to be a manager, just someone that cares,
Now, as far as like the booking, that would be maybe a tour manager or.
Well, technically it could be the manager finding opportunities, but then telling the artist to actually be the person that calls and confirms it.
So the manager's going to look for somebody that's proactive, that's already, motivated on their own. Most generally, if you're seeking a manager, you're going to have certain qualities that these managers that are most generally successful will be looking for. Is that what you're trying to explain right now?
If you're looking for a manager, right, the person is probably a good salesperson, a good talker, a good networker, and they pick up the phone and they find opportunities for you to perform. But from a legal perspective, later on, if the group blows up, it could cause problems because technically a manager is not supposed to act as an agent. So as the group becomes more popular, the manager will probably get a licensed talent agent to do the booking for you. And then prior to that, just in case you didn't hear me, and I'm talking to your audience right now, the manager will find the opportunities for you, but then if he's smart or she's smart or they are smart, they'll tell you to pick up the phone and close the deal, so to speak, so that they're not literally the ones booking it for you. They're just finding the opportunities for you. I'm going to sum up the business side for all your listeners really quick. Okay. Just to kind of make it easy, and we'll add a little bit of the business in there as well. It's called the music business, right? It's not called the music. It's called the music business, which means you have a responsibility. If you want to do this and sustain yourself with a career, you have a responsibility for understanding the business side of music. It's very, very complicated. There's a lot to learn, but definitely you could find a really great blog and you can just, follow that person. I have a YouTube channel. I release tons of videos. I write tons of books. You can buy those books. It doesn't really take much to learn this stuff. You just have to keep on doing it and being committed to sort of learning as much as you can about it. Essentially, the areas that you need to know about is you need to know about the recording side. Then you also need to know about the publishing side. Then you need to know about the touring side, the merchandising side. You should know about, obviously, the team player side, like what does a personal manager do? What's a talent agent do? What's a business manager do? What's a producer do? Because you need to understand what they charge you and the business aspects that are involved with all that. But generally speaking, a lot of the common sense that is in everyday life is the same thing in the business. If something feels a little jady or a little bit too promisey or it sounds too good to be true, then you have to kind of treat it that way. If somebody contacts you out of the nowhere saying, oh my God, I love your music, we would love to put you in film and television and, and all that kind of stuff. I get those letters and I don't even play anymore. You know what I mean? So in other words, they're just like form letters that are going out to every indie artist in the world, hoping to get your little subscription fee and your little, and get you to use their service. And so you always have to question whether or not things are legit, do research on people, get online, see if there's any history on there, see what reputation the person has, see what people are saying about that person, and just use common sense. But don't be in a rush to get somewhere, because then you're going to sign deals that you shouldn't be signing. So just take a deep breath. Don't jump at the first opportunity, and just realize that this is a long game. It's like, don't be in it to like become an overnight success. Just think of this as like investing. You put $1 in in a stock when you're like 1 year old, and then by the time you're 60, you're like, holy shit, it's worth 100,000. That's kind of how it works in the music business. Every little thing you do matters. Don't get frustrated with the fact that, oh, I'm not like successful and making tons of money and all that stuff. Just focus on doing really good work every single day. Look at each day as a blessing, right? And just basically do what you do, love what you love, and things will come together eventually for you. Don't get overly frustrated. Don't get overwhelmed. There's so much shit that you can do, but just every person you talk to matters. Everything you do matters. So always put your best foot forward.
Which of your books that you would recommend for someone that's just getting started with learning the terminology, learning about the roles that are involved?
So Business Basics for Musicians is a good start. And then basically I have a book called Music Marketing for the DIY Musician that specifically emphasizes on the do-it-yourself sort of marketing approach. And then there's what's called Introduction to Music Publishing, which goes into a lot more detail than Business Basics does. And then if you want to get more into like, saving your money and investing your money and that type of thing, there's a book called Personal Finance for Musicians. So Business Basics would be the good staple to start with that. It's available on Amazon. I mean, that's where, that's one of the number one sellers. So just go to Bobby Borg plus Amazon, or go to Amazon plus Bobby Borg, or go Amazon plus Business Basics for Musicians, and you'll find it immediately.
Now, on your website, it says that you're a music consultant. Now, are you doing consulting still?
When someone wants to speak with me personally, they can sign up for a consultation, and I'd be more than happy to speak with them. I mean, I'm obviously not the Pied Piper of music. I can't sit here and speak with every single person that wants to speak with me, just because I wouldn't have enough time in the day to do anything else. So I reserve it for people that really want to speak with me. And those are typically the people that are willing to pay a small fee, just like you would a lesson or a piano lesson or a guitar lesson. So anybody that has, and listen, when I'm halfway through the consultation, if I don't feel like we're connecting or I'm helping in any way, I just say, you know what, I'm just going to refund you because we're not getting anywhere. But that's happened once. But generally speaking, you just go to www.bobbyborg.com. I think it's /consulting, and you could sign up for a half an hour spot.
I definitely want to thank you. So, thank you very much, Bobby. And, we'll be talking again soon.
Thank you so much, man. Appreciate you having me on your podcast or your show or your research project.
Now we seem to be